Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the High Vibe Tribe Sacred Wisdom Conversations. I am here with my friend and fellow colleague, Best American Psychics colleague, Marc Lainhart. Marc is a minister. He's also an award-winning British-trained psychic medium, intuitive, published author, and he won the Best American Psychic of the Year award in 2020. Marc is based out of Seattle, Washington. His work as a writer, teacher, radio show host, inspirational thought leader, hiking guide, and certified healthcare provider is using his profound and tested perception to prospect this mysterious, mystical, and magical world around us through several profound and monumental, what he calls soul adventures. Marc is dedicated to connecting, educating, guiding, helping, healing, inspiring, and teaching others from years of personal experiences and growth through his own loss, grief, trauma, death, and dying, while promoting balance, healing, peace, transformations, inspirations, and guidance to live again, explore, and live life more fully, while assisting those wanting to discover and reveal that beautiful and brilliant diamond within. Welcome to the High Vibe Tribe, Marc.
Hi, Jill. Thank you so much for that warm, nice introduction. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you have a really, really long list of accomplishments, and you're working on your second book now. Is that correct?
I am. I'm working on my second book, and yeah, I've done a lot in my 50 plus years here on the planet, and I think that's how it should be. You should try to carpe diem, experience a day, because you don't know when your time is up. And so all of those things you just listed are what I like to call soul adventures, and really just live life to the fullest, even when life throws curveballs at us, right? It's either happening for you, it's either happening to you. And for me, it's happening for me to give me those experiences. And we are the sum of our experiences. And I think a lot of my work I do today is based on my past experiences, which I'm sure you can relate to.
Absolutely. I tell people that I thought that I knew about grief until my own mother passed away in 2016. And, I knew to the extent that I knew, but I really didn't know. And I know you can relate to that as well, Marc. So absolutely, we grow the most from our challenges.
We do. Yeah. And the old adage, what doesn't kill you does make you stronger. That's why we call it, scar tissue. We have those scars of pain and trauma and, loss, and it does heal, but it never heals exactly the way that it once was. And that's the same thing with grief. It's something that especially here in the United States, we don't honor our grief like other countries, like other cultures, and myself included. And a lot of times when we don't honor our grief, we go into that. Everybody's different, but grief is something that you learn to grow around. It never leaves you. It's something that you don't have to carry it like a heavy burden, but it is something that the alchemy of who you are, that you take with you on your journey. And again, just what I was just saying, the sum of our experiences. And I believe a lot of what I do today, Jill, is because of the experiences, even though I call them the traumas and the tragedies, or the TNT that literally blew my life up, literally changed my course direction. That changes you as a person, your vibration, your frequency, your energy, your belief systems. Some people are born with these abilities. I was not. I was sensitive, but I was not aware of the spirit world. I was not aware of the afterlife, like I had been raised and taught. I wasn't aware of the signs and the symbols and the synergy and the synchronicities that take place all the time around us. And so that's something that I started to prospect for, to find that diamond within, because diamonds are created under extreme pressures, right? And we have our free will and choice to reveal the diamond, or keep, a diamond is a piece of coal that's just in the darkness under extreme pressure. And it turns into that diamond that can be revealed. And so once I realized, that TNT, or that trauma, that tragedy, is something that will never leave me, I had to learn and be mentored and go through a bunch of different therapy and modalities to understand that grief is always a part of who you are now. And it's about how you view it, right? Your focus determines your reality. And even though, with the loss of my two brothers in the same week and my father-in-law, for many years there was survivor's guilt, but then I had to learn I don't need to carry that as a weight. I can carry that as an inspiration to help others with their grief and their trauma and to honor your grief. That's a big part of that. And we don't do that in the United States. I've worked with people all around the world, and our culture, I would say, is probably in last place when it comes to honoring our grief and, remembering those that have just gone ahead of us. It's never goodbye. It's till I see you again, and I'll see you down the road. And that's the one thing that this has taught me about grief, and a big part of what I do today.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Mark. And you're absolutely correct that when we're exposed to other cultures and how they handle and work with grief, it really helps us grow and learn and make us realize that, yeah, in the United States here, we tend to just bury it and not honor it.
Yeah, I
So
love one of my favorite, cartoons is Coco, which if you've seen Coco, it's based on the Mexican culture, and the cartoon is excellent, and it's really about mediumship. If you think about it, the Rainbow Bridge. Have you seen it? Have you?
no, not I've heard of it, but I have not seen it.
Yeah, but it's the Spanish culture, but it's really a great insight. Even though it's a cartoon, Disney does some great work and really brings some inspiration, but it really is a good insight of how they remember those that have gone on ahead of them over that rainbow bridge, and how to get back to the living versus you can't be in the spirit world. And so it's fun. It's based on music, it's based on the culture of Mexico, and just one of my favorites that you don't see a lot of movies or cartoons about mediumship and the spirituality of it, right?
True. I'm gonna have to check that out for sure, and everyone listening, check it out as well. Yeah, I love Mexico and I love the Mexican people, so I will definitely check that out. So I wanted to talk to you, Mark, and I love the analogy with the diamond and how you explain that. It's just so beautiful. When you were talking about the beginning of your journey, you mentioned going prospecting for like the signs, the synchronicities, the symbols. So can you talk about that a little bit and kind of what you uncovered along the way?
Yeah, when we have our spiritual awakening, based on our experiences, you hear about the spiritual awakening, and a lot of people have this view that kitty cats and cupcakes and rainbows and kumbaya, and it really isn't. It really is the caterpillar through the struggle of the cocoon becoming the butterfly. And so when I was sitting about reflecting on what had taken place and what I'd gone through, because I went through a lot, murder trials, cancer, MS with my family members. And it was really hard to watch them make that transition at such young ages. And all of a sudden, I got this download, and we can talk about this because psychic abilities is you're the equipment, but what you're doing is you're tuning into the downloads and the wisdom and the knowledge that's all around us, right? And all of a sudden, I started having these downloads of information. I didn't know how to process that, right? I didn't understand what was going on. For a brief time, I thought I was actually going a little crazy, a little insane in the membrane, right? And it's funny because I'm doing a summit tomorrow on do you think you're crazy, right? Because
Yeah,
our
yeah.
spiritual abilities and our spiritual gifts can be mistaken in society as mental health, mental illness, right? And a lot of times, even going back into the indigenous cultures, they knew that there was spiritual gifts and not mental illness, and they would surround that person to help them through their journey, whatever that was. And in today's society, we isolate based on mental health issues or mental illness. And sometimes it has nothing to do with mental illness. It's about the rewiring of your brain, neuroplasticity, the vibration of who you are, your auric field, your nervous system, your adrenal, all changing. And that was happening to me from the grief, from the trauma. And so I was sitting watching a show, and it was about prospectors up in Alaska looking for the gold. And all of a sudden, I just got this download that said, you're going to help other people in the future, and we want you to refer yourself as the intuitive prospector. And I went, that's a really dumb name. I self-realized it, right? I was like, that's really the intuitive prospector. But over the course of 2 decades, it made a lot more sense to me because when you're prospecting for something, it doesn't come to you. It may come to you easily, but it's not Amazon where you can get on your keyboard, type it in, it's at your door the next day. Prospecting is going out to the mountains. It's going and digging and having the right equipment and the right attitude and the right determination. And you may find it, you may not find it. And when you find it, it's worth, the juice is worth the squeeze. And you may be covered in dirt and muddy, and you find this great material that comes from the planet. And so the diamond within is up to us the free will and choice to reveal that, to live our best lives. But then as well, with that diamond created under extreme pressures, the intuitive prospector is somebody that has intuition, because I believe everybody has intuition and the soul base of who we are. What you do with it is completely up to you. But we're all prospecting for something. We're looking for that diamond within, or we're looking for the many hidden gems that are all around us. That is, think about all the riches that we coin, wealth and rich. It all comes from the planet. Trees get turned into paper, paper gets turned into money, diamonds, gems, they all come from Mother Earth. And so those years ago, as that was being downloaded to me, I was like, okay, so what do I do next with this? I don't know. I didn't have any education. I didn't have any teachers. I was really struggling with my learned behavior of my past religion upbringing. And I really just struggled. And that led me to prospect. And again, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, as Lao Tzu reminds us. And so I started looking at different things about, okay, is this real psychic, mediumship, intuition? Is it real or is it fake? Is it just for vanity and entertainment? And I realized one place led me to the next place, led me to the next place. I started off at the Berkeley Psychic Institute in California studying Intuition 101. And I started to learn how to meditate, believe it or not, going to college here at the University of Washington in my graduate studies, which had nothing to do with spirituality. It was all about sports medicine and human performance. But it was through that semester of meditations, different types of meditations, walking meditation, breath meditation, tension release meditation, focus meditation. It was all focused on the athlete. It had nothing to do with spirituality. But all of a sudden, I started to connect to my brothers. And it really challenged me logically and rationally, and the egos going, well, maybe you are a little crazy. Maybe you don't want to tell people that you're hearing voices and talking to dead people. But then you realize they're not dead. They're actually quite alive. And we have to change that viewpoint. But that led me from the college to the Berkeley Psychic Institute, to the Omega Institute in upstate New York, to the Arthur Findlay College for over a decade of studying psychic sciences, healing, mediumship, and understanding the modalities of what I do today, and getting the accreditations and getting the certifications and getting the experience, just like a medical doctor, just like a lawyer. You go in front of the board, you take the legal, qualifications to do what you're doing. And I said, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to be the best, not from an ego, not from a vanity standpoint, but I want to be the best at what I do. If you're going to have me do this, then I want to be accredited and certified, especially in the United States, because we don't have that. But that was about revealing the diamond within. And it's been 2 decades in the making. And when you reveal a diamond within, you start to see the many gems that are all around you. And that can be relationships. It could be people that come into your life. It could be your teachers. And, like I said, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And when the student is done, the student becomes the teacher, and the teacher moves on to the next. And I kind of feel that's where I'm at. Even after 20 years, I'm still feeling like an infant crawling and trying to understand all of this knowledge and ancient wisdom that's there for everybody. It's free will and choice. And I go back to Einstein. I'm not skillful in anything. I'm just passionately curious about my world and who I am. And I resonate with Einstein's quotes a lot. And I come back to that. I'm just passionately curious, and I want to prospect for everything. And I think that's why the intro has so much stuff, because I have done a lot in my life. And if today was my last day, I can say I lived a good life. I lived a happy life with struggle, but I also did a lot in life. And that's what everybody should be doing.
Absolutely, and it's my passion as well to continue learning. I mean, you and I met all those years ago at John Holland and Janet Nohavic's class, I believe, is where we met. And when I come across people that say, "Oh, well, I was born with it," or this or that, I don't need training, I say everyone needs training. And to me, it's a knowledge I quest to, I've probably had 12 different mentors myself, and I've learned something from each one of them. And I love that you have that same philosophy,
Mhm.
Mark, because that's how we grow. That's how we continue evolving, right? Now, I wanted to circle back around and ask you what you feel about where our loved ones are. Where do you feel like the heavenly, or the other world, as we call it, where do you feel like that's located?
Yeah, that's a great question. I forgot that we met at Omega. That was back in like 2012, right? That's
I
years
know.
ago. And I remember it was Janet Nohavik that actually introduced me to. She said, "There's a college in England." I'm like, "There's a college?" Like, really? There's a college to study this? And she's like, yeah. And I think you should go and you would really do well with this. I was like, oh, okay. And then the next year I went to Arthur Finley College.
Yes.
But coming back to, because I get this question a lot, and we have to start thinking in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And what I mean by that, and this goes all the way back to Nikola Tesla talked about this in the late 1800s. This isn't anything new. And this goes even back to ancient scriptures from around the world of talking about the energy and the frequency and vibration. And people always ask me, where do you think heaven is? If you believe in heaven, because I work with people that are full believers, agnostic, atheists. And they say, well, where do you think heaven is? And I said, heaven isn't a location. Heaven is a vibration. Because if you think about it logically, we're on a round planet going around a big ball of fire out in outer space. We forget that we're on a planet, and on a round planet, there is metaphysically no up or down because it's round. So you can't go up and you can't go down. A lot of times, based on teachings, based on religious teachings, they have that philosophy: if you're not good enough, you go down, and if you are good enough, you can get up into the big pearly gates and hang out in the clouds, right? And for me, it just never made sense to me. And so that was part of my prospecting to understand and kind of, not kind of, but really unlearn a lot of things that I was taught based. I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. And there's a big difference between the two that people may not understand. But for me, heaven isn't a location, it's a vibration. And when you realize that we are vibrating right now at a certain frequency, just because we don't see it does not mean it is not around us. Science teaches us that. The telescope teaches that. The microscope tells us that. The wind tells us that. The gravity tells us. The Wi-Fi signal that's connecting you and I right now tells us that. We don't see those things, but we know that we are dependent on them. The air that we breathe, we know that we need air. And when we don't see it and we don't have it, we know that, oh crap, I'm not breathing. Electricity, can't see electricity. We can see the effects of the wind on the tree as I look outside my studio here, but I can't see the wind. And so when you realize that there are a lot of things that it's Wi-Fi, it's wind, gravity, not a big deal. But then we start talking about the spiritual people that are always just a thought away and are around us, a world within a world, right? And I remember going back to Janet Noack because she wrote a book about in between worlds, right? She talked about the two worlds. And that for me was very eye-opening to be like, no, your loved one, your friend, your family, or your fur baby, they're just a thought away. And if you ask and you believe, you take that divine breath in, all of a sudden you're going to start to receive, and then you're going to perceive what the information you're receiving. And that can come through the signs, the symbols, the synergy, the synchronicities, the patterns that are all around us, numerology, mathematics, coincidences. I just wrote an article on the soul adventures of curiosities and coincidences, because Einstein goes back to, again, another Einstein quote, synchronicities are God's way of remaining anonymous. Again, whoever or whatever God is for you, but I always found that fascinating. So if you start to think of something and you ask, believe, receive, and perceive, it may not happen right away, and you're probably not going to get a big booming voice from the sky. And if you do, I'd love to hear about that journey. But all of a sudden, as my mentor taught me, it comes in like a lamb, not like a lion. And the more that you're aware of your environment, the more that you're not distracted by our technology, social media, the news cycle, the drama, all of a sudden you start to hear a lot more. And this goes all the way back to 12th century Rumi, the mystic and poet of the 12th century, that talked about the more still you become and the more silent you become, the more you'll actually start to hear. And that's us attuning to a frequency that is all around us. And science teaches us that the brain can actually receive in many different frequencies just based on brain waves. And so, I've done a lot of studies. I've been actually hooked up to the God helmet and tested, what does my brain look like when I'm in meditation? What does my brain look like when I'm in mediumship? What does my brain look like when I'm asleep? And they're different waves. And that's all it is. Heaven isn't a location, it's a vibration. And the reason we assume that it's up is because, as somebody that's had an NDE, a near-death experience, I did start to ascend up out of my body to look back in a river accident that I was in years ago. And I remember going, oh, this is interesting. I feel very peaceful and very loved, and I'm ready to go. But it's interesting that I'm going to drown in a river because I was a very excellent swimmer. My nickname growing up was Fish, and I was in the Coast Guard as a rescue swimmer, and I'm going to drown. How ironic. And then I was like, wait a minute. No, I'm not going to. And all of a sudden, I was pinned against logs. I don't know how I got out of it, but I just shot right back down in my body and I popped up. So that means I had more work to do.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
but it's a vibration. It's not a location, is how I'd answer your question.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with you. And, sometimes some of my clients or students will say, all of a sudden the signs and synchronicities started coming in. And what I say to that is, they were there all along. It's up to us to raise our vibrational frequency, like you said, leave the chatter behind, disconnect. And once we start doing that, then we are attuned to those signs and synchronicities,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah, and I stand on the shoulders of great teachers and mentors that have helped me to perceive and receive that knowledge that you're talking about because it's there for us to access. It's just there's certain points in time that we're ready, and there's certain points in time that we're not ready, right? The ego says you're not ready for that. The spiritual awakening is happening. I'm not ready for that. But I stand on the shoulders of great teachers and great mentors, including Janet No Havoc, who really push me to see beyond myself, to push past my ego, to get out of my ego body, out of my ego mind, and really start tapping into what is unseen and trusting the process, knowing that the universe is working with me, not against me. The way knows the way, as we like to say. And, it's hard for those that, aren't willing to open up to that and just critique it, and that's why they'll never see it, right? I always teach my students now on believe it, because the power and the divinity comes within, and when you believe it, that resonates out through the auric field, through the nervous system, through your adrenals, through your energy. And so if you believe it, then you start to see it. And I say see it up here because I tell people all the time we have three eyes in life: two to look, one to see. There's a big difference between what we see here and what we see here. So when you start downloading and tapping into that frequency and surrendering and getting rid of the ego, all of a sudden great things and very interesting things, and sometimes fear-based things, because we don't what we tend to don't understand can lead us to fear, starts to move the caterpillar into the butterfly, if you will.
Yes. Absolutely. It's important that we have grace with ourselves,
Great.
because our every one of our journeys is different, and part of my joy is teaching people about the ego and how to understand to merge the ego and the higher self. And I know that you do a lot of that, spiritual work as well, Mark, and your own students. And I'm the same with you. I would not be where I am now without my own mentors, and I will honor them until my last breath and beyond, because I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for their knowledge and wisdom, and to be able to continue the work, and now, be a teacher myself. And by the way, I don't know if you remember this, but at the Best American Psychics Retreat, you handed me one of those crystal kind of gemstones that had a saying on it, and it said teacher. And I still have it to this day. I should have brought it out of my cabinet, because I was in resistance. So many of my clients were saying, we're ready for you to teach, we're ready for you to teach. And I'm like you, I wanted to make sure that the timing was right, and have I studied enough, do I, am I ready? And it was so beautiful when you walked up. You said, I don't know why, but meant to hand you this. And from that moment, that was a life-changing moment for me, because I said, okay, I'm listening, spirit. I'm gonna listen. So thank you for that, Mark.
You're very welcome. I didn't realize that. And it's that loop that we get into. Where, if not now, when, right? And
Yeah.
there are times that people should be teachers, and there are times that people should probably not be teachers. They don't have enough experience, enough wisdom or education, or age brings knowledge and wisdom too. Aging is a part of that, right? A lot of my mentors have moved to the other side. They're no longer here in the physical realm, right?
Yeah.
But when we fill that loop with that self-sabotage, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not, smart enough. And it's just like, no, that's the ego. Because that is, your first part of your life is developing the ego to survive. Second half of your life is like, I don't really need the ego because there's so much magic. And you said something about resistance. And one of the things I teach on is what we resist will usually persist. And the lesson
Yeah.
repeats until it completes. And I have learned that the hard way, right? I'm a Taurus,
Yeah.
one of the most stubborn signs in the astrology cycle. And so there's many times that I've hit my head against the wall and being like, oh, after the 50th time going, oh, that's what they meant. That's what they are telling me to do, right? So coming back to that word, you said grace is very important for your listeners and your students. Grace, patience. Patience is the big one. It's not going to happen real time. And we as humans want real time. We want it now. So patience, grace, trust, dedication, discipline. If you're truly wanting to prospect for the diamond within, you're going to need those qualities, right? Those foundations that I teach on. And eventually you will become the teacher because you've gone through enough lessons now, both good, bad, and indifferent, to be like, I hate to bring the Star Wars, mythology into it, but a Jedi master has failed more times than the student has even started. And so failure that I teach on is first attempt at learning. So you should be failing often. You should be failing daily, and not be scared of that, not be intimidated by that, because it's the failures that strengthen you and give you that knowledge and wisdom to become a Jedi master. I remember when I started, I would be a Padawan in 2012. A Padawan is a learner in the Star Wars universe, and Janet No Havoc would be a Jedi master, and John Holland would be a Jedi master, and they're teaching me like all this stuff, and I'm like, really? Like my ego and my learned behaviors. So you have to trust the process, and you have to surrender. I got a little thing up here. It's a reminder, and it's from Buddha, and it says you got to let that stuff go. So it doesn't say stuff; it says something else. But I know for your video, but it really is, a lot of that stuff is that it, and you got to let that go if you really want to create new space to fill in and then reveal the diamond within. So great, a big part of that.
Absolutely. So I want to switch directions now and ask you I want to talk about your thoughts on AI. It's so huge right now and it's gaining so much momentum. And I have my own. I've downloaded some information about it, but I want to find out what your thoughts are on the AI, and let's discuss that.
So we're gonna go back a ways here for AI. Okay. And I love these conversations. So for your listeners, buckle up, because the next 2 to 3 years are going to be not just with AI, robotics, AI. Those are the conversations we're having now. But I have long talked about what's going to start to unfold down in Antarctica, the secrets of Antarctica. There's a whole continent at the bottom of the planet that's waiting to be discovered and prospected. It's going to really change how we see our world. The James Webb Telescope, that's 1 million miles out there, is telling us every day how small and how small we are and how big the universe is. And within this roaring 20s, our roaring 20s of transformation and change, I've told people, and I've forecast and predicted, that we will learn officially that we're not alone in this universe. Whether they've been here the whole time, or they come from deep within the planet or the ocean or from outer space, when you realize that you're not alone and that there's another species of intelligence out there, that's a paradigm, that's a tipping point. And I can say that as a true experiencer. I don't put that in my bio, but in my Coast Guard days, I had my first experience with an extra dimensional intelligence that I still to this day don't understand what I saw out in the big blue, which would be down at the tip of the Bermuda Triangle off Puerto Rico. And so as an experiencer, it's very similar to what I saw in the movie 1976, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, with all the lights. The only difference was it was out in the middle of the ocean. There was no ships, and they did things that made you go, wow, that doesn't move like the way, this was back in 1999, 2000. So this was 25 years ago to what I witnessed with other people on my ship, to go, okay, I don't understand what I'm seeing. But the weird thing about it, Jill, was I knew it knew I was watching it. I don't know how to describe that, but there was an intelligence, and it wasn't fear-based. It was very knowledgeable, very, still to this day makes my hair rise. But it was so inviting to say, and it put on a show for about 8 to 10 minutes, all these balls of light. And all of a sudden they just went into one big ball, vibrated, and went down into the water, and the water lit up. And we were out in the middle of nowhere, right? So this would be the same time Hale-Bopp was up in the sky, the Hale-Bopp comet. And because the logical mind tries to debunk, right, what you're seeing. And then when you see it, then you have questions. 25 years later, I have questions. So for your listeners, buckle up, because there's going to be information that's going to be revealed, not to scare you, but for some people, the status quo changes, and they don't want status quo to change, right? They'll stay in their lane, plow their field, and all of a sudden that gets upended. This is where AI is now going to come into play. Now, AI, I've done a lot of research on AI, because you hear a lot of it. There's a lot of fear-based energy around it. But I'm going to offer you a different perspective, because AI actually started back in the 1950s with the supercomputer. This is tied to mathematics and numerology, going all the way back to Pythagoras. And you have to think about artificial intelligence. I'm now starting to hear the words, it's changed. So it started out in the 50s as AI, but we have to build the first computer to understand what is AI, right? We have to understand what's the concept of AI? And now I've actually heard it as superior intelligence. And I'm like, that's a very interesting because the language has changed from AI to SI, superior intelligence. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And you have to think about at certain points in our time, in our history, we have to have the right elements and we have to have the right mindset in order to, we as humans think that we create knowledge. I would argue and say we don't create knowledge. We get to a point where we are ready to access knowledge, just like going to a library. Back in the day before internet, we had to actually go to the library and have a Dewey Decimal System and pull the card and find the book and search for it. So, in my opinion, I don't believe that humans create knowledge. I believe humans access knowledge, and that's going to be the same with AI. So, if we go back in time to the Industrial Revolution, we didn't have elements like steel and aluminum and things from our wars that were created. And at the turn of the century in Chicago at the World Fair, we created electricity for the first time. We went from kerosene lamps and lit up the first block in Chicago with electricity, right? AC versus DC, Nikola Tesla versus Edison, right? And now to this day, the electricity, which powers everything, and we can be seen from, outer space, the planet lit up. Before that, we were in darkness. So we needed certain elements to get to certain parts of being able to access this AI versus SI, superior intelligence. So we have metals, we have electricity. And as we continue to go on, we get into the 1950s and we start to build the first computers, motherboards, the technology. The first supercomputer literally filled up rooms. It was that big because it had to process, right?
No.
And I can say that I'm BC, before computers. So I watched the whole evolution of our computer technology to where we didn't even have a thing called a keyboard. It was called a typewriter. We didn't have a thing called a mouse. There was no such concept as a mouse, right? But now we just take it for what it is. I'm looking at my laptop that's based on the metals and the plastics and the polymers. And so we, at certain points in time, have to follow a pattern of technology that allows us to grow and evolve with that technology to where now we're on the cusp of revealing information. And AI, even though it's data fed right now, we're teaching computers how to speak language. And for some, that's scary because they watched a Hollywood movie called The Terminator, and they're going to become sentient and realize that humans are a virus and they're going to take us out because we're killing the planet. But at the same time, at some point, AI will become sentient. But if we base it on a scale, I think it's called the Kardashian scale, we're not even a level 1 civilization. We think we are, but there's classifications of civilization, advanced civilizations. We're not going to reach civilization 1 and probably for another 100 years. And imagine what 100 years from now looks like compared to what it was even just 50 years ago when you and I were growing up, right?
Yeah.
So once we reach that civilization 1 category based on the, I think it's, I'm not sure I'm saying the Kardashian scale or the your listeners will have to, your audience will have to look it up. It's like the Kardashian scale, but I'm not sure I'm saying.
Okay.
But it's based on a measurement of 5 advancements of evolution. We're not even at level 1 yet, and we probably won't reach that. But what's going to happen to get to that level 1 is now we have the tools and the mindset and the accessibility to start tapping into the knowledge that AI is going to probably start answering some questions that are going to be very uncomfortable and can be scary to people because it's changing the status quo. Consciousness, what we're witnessing, Jill, we're witnessing the transformation of 3-dimensional construct of consciousness into a 4th dimensional quantum. There's a lot of quantum computing, quantum physics, quantum mechanics. You and I are doing an interview based on digital, the digital verse, right? The multiverse. Because are you still in Mississippi?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm in Seattle, but we're conversing through waves of signals and energy, right? But we couldn't get here without the history to get here. And what's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to start unlocking, it's already unlocking doors that the experts and the pundits just don't understand, right? And there's things that we just don't understand. And when we don't understand something, we can tend to go to that fear-based energy and pull away, belief systems, ego. And, if you go back even just to the turn of the century and you're witnessing the horse and buggy start to transform into the automobile. But if you were from 150 years ago and you see an automobile today, you'd be like, what is that? The lights are on, the windshield wipers, it's moving. What is that an alien? Is that an extra dimensional construct?
Yeah.
It's going to happen with AI. It's going to become superior intelligence. And you have to wonder, It's been there the whole time. And is it a
Yeah.
superior intelligence because it's starting to reveal itself to us in a way that we can comprehend and understand, even if it's just a fraction of what the entire knowledge base is, which Einstein, even in the 50s, talked about quantum consciousness. It's going to take hundreds of centuries to understand quantum capacity and thinking and the evolution of our consciousness. We're witnessing that right now. I think that's why the world is in such turmoil, is because there is an awakening taking place around the globe, and people are struggling with that. And AI is going to be a catalyst that's going to put us into a level one civilization and travel amongst the stars eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you, and it's fascinating to witness this because I agree, it's been there all along, just kind of like energy that, you know, before you understand mediumship, you have no awareness of it. And then once you step into that, it's like, wow, that's a whole nother world, literally, that's opened up. And I feel the same way with AI. I guess, my only wish and hope is that people will still choose to do their own shadow and ego work. And I guess I'm saying that from a place of when I first started teaching, I was teaching psychism and mediumship, and I didn't teach at all about shadow. I would mention the ego a little bit in teaching, very little, but I didn't really teach a lot about the shadow. And what I witnessed was that without that strong foundation, people had not really done their own inner work, and then they had all of these shiny tools. And over time, without a strong foundation, I witnessed some of them dismantling and not understanding their own energy while trying to help others. So I brought in an entire teaching of shadow work and how important it is before you open yourself up to helping others to go within, peel back those onion layers. So I guess that is my only concern, I guess if you would even call it a concern with AI, is, I want people to understand, because the AI and even the SI is based on our own frequency, where we are. And I want people to understand that energy, because I agree with you. Things that come through may end up shaking people up. So I'm hoping that they will still take the time to do their own shadow work. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's such a good point, because you're right. I would see when I started on this journey, I saw a lot of people that were, and it's good that we want to help others, right? That's to be in service is the highest calling, right? And
Yes.
but a lot of times I would see early in my career, myself included, I would, my mantra is, be humble or get humbled, and I've been humbled many times. But I would see many people that would not do the self work, the shadow work, the dark work, the dark work of the soul. It's the yin and the yang. It's the balance between the light and the darkness, right? It's the empire versus the rebellion, right? And I would see a lot of times people, and myself included, that wouldn't do the soul work. And that's what I'm saying. That spiritual awakening is not what you think it is with the kumbaya and rainbows and everything is grand. No, it really is a dark night of the soul. But once you get through that struggle, and I always use the caterpillar to butterfly, perspective, is the caterpillar literally deliquifies in the cocoon, and its mindset is, this is the end of the world. I'm melting, I'm deliquifying. And then through the struggle of reforming, and that's the dark night, it builds up a new body that allows it to fly. And then it actually has to struggle to get out of the cocoon. So if you ever see a caterpillar struggling to get out, don't help it. Don't be that person, because it'll never fly. It never sharpens the wings. And it's the sharpness, the diamonds, right? The sharpness that allows that butterfly to emerge with a whole new perspective and go, I have a whole new perspective because I'm up in the air. I'm not down on the ground anymore. And I always tell people your relationship will change after the dark night of the soul and doing the soul work, because it's really hard to have caterpillar speak with butterfly people or have butterfly speak with caterpillar people, right? You're still one and the same. We're still humans. We're still a part of this planet. But sometimes you're not, sometimes your relationships with yourself and your surrounding, your careers, it will all change. And that's for the better, not for the worse. And, we're really good at self-sabotaging, but we're also very intelligent. It's in our DNA, Jill. It's in our DNA. And that's what we forget about. And what I mean by that, we think, therefore we are. There's a higher level of consciousness here. And if I was to take my DNA, which growing up, we had not sequenced the DNA yet, that was not a thing. And then eventually we sequenced it, which is going to be the future of everything, medicine, genetics, getting rid of disease will be through the DNA. Once they sequence the DNA, you can take your own DNA and take a little piece of it and put it between two pieces of glass and look under the microscope at it. And within your own DNA is the flower of life, is the Fibonacci sequence, is the golden ratio. So it's in who you are. It's not Marc's opinion. It's not Marc's perspective. It is literally the DNA of who you are, that divinity that a lot of the teachers from the past, from Krishna, Gandhi, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, they all talked about the divinity within, and that's what they meant. It's in your DNA, and you can see it under a microscope. So when you realize it's in you, it's going to be the struggle on, and you take this one day at a time. It's not a sprint, it is a marathon. And like you made a good example about mediumship. When I started to have my conversations in my mind with my brothers, it was very disturbing. I didn't talk about it for a couple of years. And then I got the right teacher and the right format to start understanding in layman's terms what this really is all about. It's not, I think at that time too, the movie had come out, The Sixth Sense, where the little boy was seeing the actual dead people and all their, just gory covered. And I'm like, I don't want that. Who wants to sign up for that? I don't. But over time, through education and understanding and patience and trust, you realize that you see the spirit world two ways. Objectively, with your eyes, there are people that see objectively. I do not. I see them subjectively through the third eye. And when they present themselves to me and I become aware of them, they're covered in blood and holding their head under their arm. It's very much not at all a Hollywood movie. So that's the other thing you have to unlearn, is the movies that you've watched and grew up with are not the reality of the work that we do today. And, that's where your teachers and education and patience come into play, because you need to have that experience and be introduced to that. Because I, at 27, did not sign up to be a psychic spiritual medium. Not at all. And then write a book and have a podcast about it. It's like, no, not at all what I thought.
So let's tell everybody how they can tune into your podcast, Marc.
Yeah, so a couple ways. The show is called Inspired Living. We are syndicated. We're in our 9th season. We have had wonderful guests on our show, including yourself. And we cover all topics of life, from medicine to metaphysics to mediumship. You can get Inspired Living wherever you listen to your favorite podcast now. We're also streaming through Alexa and Audible. You can get it here at my website at marclainhart.com, the global player. I only do 2 episodes a month, but we really have the conversations through community that inspire transformation and healing and a different perspective and encouragement and motivation. And it's not something that I ever thought I would do, but I love it because I get to talk to amazing people that I usually normally wouldn't have access to. And I get to learn and I get books and I get different things that I get to learn. Again, I'm passionately curious, not very skillful. I'm just passionately curious. And the podcast is what that reflects. And so you can get us wherever. Just look for my ugly mug and Inspired Living Radio, and you can get it wherever you find your podcast. We're on many platforms, but I love it because I get feedback sometimes years after. I listened to an episode from 2 years ago. I'll hear from a client. I came across your podcast and you were talking about this, and it really inspired me and it really helped me. And I think that feedback and those ratings and downloads that we've received over the last few years has helped us become not only a best inspirational podcast, but a best spiritual podcast according to FeedSpot that references, and there's thousands of podcasts out there. Let's just be clear. So it's an honor to be recognized for the work that we're doing. And I think people, might get something out of it, and it seems to hit right where they're at. We try to meet people where they're at, and my guests are just absolutely beautiful and amazing and inspiring. To this day, I still can't believe I got to interview Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the Four Agreements. That was one of the books that I ever read in my spiritual. I read The Untethered Soul, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, and The Four Agreements were the 3 first books on my spiritual journey 2 decades ago I read. And if you would have told me that, years later that I would be interviewing a best-selling author from The Four Agreements, I would have said, what are you smoking? What are you? That's not at all what I saw. But when you trust verse and you are patient to manifestation, intent. I always talk about set intention, which will lead you to ascension, but there's power in patience because you got to manifest. And most people don't manifest because they're not patient enough. It may take a couple years, it may take 2 decades, but eventually you'll get there, and you're getting there with a whole new skill set that you never knew that you had access to, or it was within you, right? That DNA that I was talking about.
Yes, that's awesome. And congratulations on the 9th year in the syndication. That's phenomenal, my
Yeah.
friend. That's awesome. Well done, well done. Uh, so how do you offer mentoring sessions? So if once our High Vibe Tribe's listening, what all do you offer in your services?
Yeah, so the best way is to head to the website. You can also just plug in the Intuitive Prospector, and you'll locate me. Part of the journey is I want you to prospect to find me. I don't put myself out there anymore. I used to early in my career. And it's amazing, Jill, that when you don't put yourself out there, you get a lot of people that find you and prospect. The like attracts like, energy attracts energy, right? And so I'd say
Yeah,
go to my website and peruse the website. Look at some of the, education and testimonials, and then click on some of the stuff because it may take you into directions that you didn't even know. But as far as mentorship, I do have a few people that I mentor throughout the year. A couple of them now have turned professional, part of Best American Psychics as well. So, it's always an honor to be called their mentor, teacher. Again, kind of going back to when it had you the stone. I didn't think I'd be teaching in my future, but I do offer mentorship. I do offer a spiritual development group called SDG, which we meet here via Zoom middle of the week on Wednesdays. And I've got students from across the United States, Canada, and UK. And spiritual development is not just psychic. It's not just mediumship. It's looking at healing. It's looking at intuition. Like last night, we talked about the quantum mechanics. And I believe that quantum science is actually holding the secrets of spirituality. I believe it's that scientific within the quantum realm that's going to unlock the spirituality and the gifts that we have. But I have many people that have been with me. Geez, I've been doing this for 9 years now, and I've got new students that come in. And what I love about the group, the tribe, is it's a balance, and nobody is better than one another. We sit at a round table, and we just have different perspectives on where we sit. And some of us have more. Some of my senior students are much older than me and have more experience. I just run the group, and then we have newbies that come in and they understand the struggle of a spiritual awakening or that dark night of the soul. And I would say to your tribe is don't do this alone. When you have a spiritual awakening, there's a lot of isolation because there's a lot of opinions and judgments from the outside world, the material world, but also from yourself. And I found in setting up this SDG group, this tribe, because when I was going through it, there wasn't the technology, there wasn't the Zoom. I was actually doing an in-person every week with 4 people for 2 years. And after that, we started then going online. And I realized there's a much bigger reach, and there's a lot of interest because a lot of people would be saying to themselves, I feel so isolated, especially if you're the spiritual awakening or you're going through grief. It's a very isolated path. And I would say, don't do that. Be like the indigenous cultures of our past that surround people that are having a spiritual awakening, which some would say is mental health issues. I don't believe that it's mental health issues. It's you transforming at the cellular level, the alchemy of who you are. And sometimes that can be very disturbing for the path and very disturbing for the ego. And then, of course, you throw opinions in and experts in, and then people back away from it. And they don't really truly discover their authentic self. So surround yourself with community, people that have gone through what you and I've gone through and have learned. Like I said, I forgot that we went all the way back to Omega in 2012. That's 2012, right? And I'm still just touching the surface of all of this. But I do mentor, I do groups, I do events, I do summits. And now with being newly retired, I get to do what I love. And the secret of life, y'all, is getting paid to do what you love, because we're the only species that pays to live here. And if we're going to live here and we're going to get paid, you might as well do what you love. You're not paying me. I don't care about the money. You're paying for my time, because my time that I've learned and understood and been mentored on, your time is your greatest commodity. Your health is your true wealth, because without time and without health, none of this matters. And so I was just talking to a client today that you probably know how much money you have in your bank account, your savings account, your checking account. But the one balance that we do not know as humans is what time is left in our time account. So it becomes important to carpe diem, to seize the day today, because tomorrow is not promised. And that's the other thing that I've learned, that yesterday's history, tomorrow's the mystery, today's the gift. That's why we call it the present moment. And there's power in that. When people realize that the present moment is where you plant the seed of what the future you hope to have, but is not guaranteed to anybody. And so, that's, just being present here in this interview today with you is where my mind is at and focused in on that. And that's what I would say to your tribe is, don't do this alone. Unity through community is what I teach on.
Beautiful. That's amazing, Marc. Thank you so much for joining us on the High Vibe Tribe and bringing your awesome wisdom to the Sacred Wisdom conversations. And what an awesome conversation that we've had tonight. And I love your perspective on the AI. I'm excited to see how this blossoms. Part of the book that I'm currently writing now, I'm channeling some information on the children that are coming in that started arriving in 2015. Part of their purpose is to anchor in and ground that energy from the AI. So it's fascinating that we are blessed to be able to witness this as it's birthed into our reality. It's been here all along, but
Yeah.
now it's being birthed into something that we can be a part of and explore. So thank you for your perspective on that as well. It was eye-opening for sure.
I love the name of it, High Vibe Tribe. I love that. That's and it's about, again, step into your evolution. Don't be scared of your evolution of who you are. Step into your evolution and have that high vibe, because it's the higher vibe that's going to allow you to connect to what is seen and what is unseen. And when you're surrounded by people that have been there, done that, got the t-shirt, it makes your journey a lot more easier than trying to do it by yourself. And so, thank you for what you do, Jill. Thank you for your writing, putting your energy out into this very chaotic planet of ours. And we've even got a shared book together. I was just thinking about that. Between Worlds, right? And it's fun, but it's also the struggle, the burden and the blessings of this. So you have to have the balance between the burdens and the blessing and the balance of what we do. So step into your evolution and definitely vibe high with your tribe. That's what I'd say.
Thank you so much, Marc, and thank you again. And thank you to everyone who will be listening to the replay. Definitely check out Marc's website. He has a lot of awesome offerings there for sure. And until next time, many blessings, everyone, and keep your vibration high. And remember that we are all connected through unity. And remember also our divinity. Until next time, many blessings. Namaste.